The Zaxian captain sneered at the view screen, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he watched the human refugees flee their burning colony ships. Krulok, commander of the Galactic Alliance invasion fleet, had waited decades for this moment, the chance to put the upstart humans in their place. He turned to his subordinate, a chitinous Katal warrior, and hissed his orders. "Target their engines, cripple them, let them drift and die slowly," Krulok snarled, his forked tongue flicking between jagged teeth. The humans must learn the price of defiance. On the bridge of the UES Indefatigable, Admiral Vincent Campbell clenched his fists as he watched the alien fleet tear into the defenseless refugee ships. The distress calls filled the air, each plea for mercy met with cold silence from the Zaxian battlecruisers. Campbell had known this day would come, ever since humanity first stood against the Galactic Alliance's brutal slave empire. 5 years ago, astronaut Catherine Decker had landed on the Voxari homeworld, a pre-industrial civilization crushed under the boot of the Krell. She had watched in horror as a Krell master beat a defiant slave named Ector nearly to death. Against orders, Decker intervened, stunning the Krell with her weapon and tending to Ector's wounds. Word of Decker's encounter reached Earth and sparked outrage. The United Earth government demanded the Voxari's immediate release, but the Krell scoffed at the ultimatum, confident in their military might. In response, Campbell led a strike fleet that shattered the Krell's defenses and captured their leadership. Ector, now a resistance leader, worked with human forces to liberate his people. But the Alliance would not let such an insult stand. They viewed humans as heartless conquerors, citing the swift defeat of the Krell as proof of humanity's ruthless ambition. And so they had launched this massive invasion, determined to contain humanity's expansion and stamp out the dangerous ideas of freedom and equality. Campbell gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles turning white as he watched the refugee ships burn. Each life lost was a knife in his heart, a reminder of the terrible price of humanity's principles. But he would not yield. He would not let the Alliance's cruelty triumph. "All ships, engage the enemy," Campbell ordered, his voice steady despite the rage coursing through his veins. "We will not let them slaughter the innocent. We will fight until every slave is free, no matter the cost." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing as they clashed with the Alliance armada. The fate of the galaxy, and the very definition of what it means to be human, hung in the balance. As the battle raged around Craxus, Admiral Campbell studied the latest intelligence reports on the Zaxian slave market. The data painted a grim picture of suffering and despair, with countless lives bought and sold like mere commodities. Campbell's fists tight as he read the details, his grit hardening with each passing moment. He turned to his command staff, his voice steady and determined. "We have an opportunity to strike at the heart of the Zaxian slave trade. If we can liberate the slaves on Craxus and destroy the market infrastructure, we'll deal a crippling blow to the Alliance's economy and morale." Campbell summoned Captain Marcus Hawkins to the briefing room. Hawkins, a battle-hardened veteran with a keen strategic mind, listened intently as the Admiral outlined the mission. He would lead a strike team to infiltrate Craxus, free the slaves, and reduce the market to rubble. Ector, the Voxari resistance leader, stepped forward. "I must join this mission, Admiral. My people suffer under the yoke of Zaxian oppression. I cannot stand idle while they cry out for freedom." Campbell nodded, understanding the fierce purpose in Ector's eyes. "Very well. Your knowledge of Zaxian tactics will be invaluable on the ground." As the strike team approached Craxus under cloak, Hawkins and Ector reviewed the market layout. Ector's eyes widened as he pointed to a section of the map. "There, in the eastern quadrant, those pens hold the most recently acquired slaves." His voice caught in his throat. "Including humans captured during the initial assault." Hawkins placed a reassuring hand on Ector's shoulder. "We'll free them all, my friend. No one will be left behind." The team made planetfall, moving swiftly and silently through the market's outer defenses. They reached the slave pens, Hawkins and Ector taking point as they breached the doors. Inside, the stench of fear and despair assaulted their senses. Hundreds of slaves from dozens of species huddled together in squalid conditions. Among them, a group of human laborers, their once proud spirits broken by the cruelty of their captors. Hawkins tossed them weapons from the team's arsenal. Today, you fight for your freedom, for the freedom of all those the Alliance would enslave." Invigorated by Hawkins's words, the slaves rose up, their fury and purpose lending strength to their emaciated frames. They surged forward, overwhelming the Zaxian guards in a tide of righteous anger. High above Craxus, Campbell led the United Earth Fleet against the Zaxian warships. The human vessels danced through the void, their superior maneuverability and firepower making short work of the lumbering Zaxian battlecruisers. On the ground, Hawkins, Ector, and their growing army of freed slaves battled through the market, leaving devastation in their wake. The once mighty slaver's paradise crumbled beneath the onslaught, its cages shattered and its auction blocks reduced to debris. As the last of the slaves were shuttled to safety, Ector heard a voice he thought lost forever. "Brother?" He turned to see a young Voxari female, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "Lixia!" Ector embraced his long-lost sister, tears streaming down his face. I thought I'd never see you again." Lixia clung to her brother, her voice trembling. "You came for me, for all of us. You never gave up hope." Their reunion was cut short by news from the fleet, a broadcast from Craxus's surface, featuring a defiant crewlock. The Zaxian captain stood before a massive crowd of slaves, a wicked gleam in his eyes. "You think you have won, humans? You think your pathetic morality can triumph over the might of the Alliance? Witness the price of your defiance." With a savage grin, Crewlock gave the order to execute 1,000 slaves, their screams echoing through the transmission. Campbell's blood ran cold as he watched the carnage unfold. But even as revulsion threatened to overwhelm him, he saw something else in the eyes of the slaves, and those of the Zaxian citizens forced to watch the slaughter. Doubt, disgust, the first stirrings of rebellion. Crewlock's act of barbarism had not cowed the galaxy, as he had hoped. Instead, it ignited a fire that would soon consume the rotting edifice of the Alliance, burning away the chains of oppression and lighting the way to a new era of freedom. And as word of the victory at Craxus spread, other slave races rallied to humanity's cause. The Korthi, the Zaxians' oldest foes, pledged their advanced technology and ships to the growing coalition. Whispers of dissent began to circulate among the Alliance's own member species, the seeds of doubt taking root in the hearts of those who had once stood with the slavers. The war was far from won. The Alliance still commanded vast fleets and legions of loyal soldiers. But with each new ally, each slave uprising, each crack in the facade of Zaxian invincibility, Campbell and his comrades drew closer to their ultimate goal, a galaxy where the chains of bondage lay shattered, where all beings could live in dignity and freedom. The road ahead would be long and treacherous, paved with the blood of heroes and tyrants alike. But for now, in the aftermath of their triumph on Craxus, the soldiers of the United Earth Alliance allowed themselves a moment of hope, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they fought not just for themselves, but for the future of all sentient life. Ector turned to Hawkins, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "So, my friend, where do we strike next?" The Korthi battlecruiser Nemesis sliced through space, its sleek hull overflowing with advanced weaponry. Admiral Campbell watched from the bridge of the UES Indefatigable as the alien vessel unleashed a barrage of quantum torpedoes, their purple-tinged energy signatures streaking across the void. The Alliance defense grid surrounding Nexus Prime crumbled under the onslaught. Zaxian warships, their shields overwhelmed by the Korthi's superior firepower, exploded in silent bursts of light and debris. "All ships, push forward," Campbell ordered, his voice carrying across the fleet's comm channels. "We break this siege today." Human vessels surged alongside their Korthi allies, exploiting gaps in the enemy formation. On the planet's surface, beleaguered colonists cheered as Alliance dropships fled, their invasion thwarted. In the aftermath of the victory, Campbell convened with his senior staff. "We've bloodied their nose," he said, studying tactical readouts. "Now we hit them where it hurts. Shipyards, supply depots. We cut off their ability to wage war." Ector, the Voxari resistance leader, nodded in agreement. "My contacts report unrest spreading through Alliance territory. Your victories give hope to the oppressed." Across the sector, human strike teams backed by Korthi firepower hammered Alliance installations. Krulok, the Zaxian commander, raged as reports of defeat after defeat flooded in. "Impossible!" he snarled, tail lashing in fury. "How can these mammals and their alien lapdogs best us?" A subordinate, trembling, approached with a datapad. "Sir, our logistics network is in shambles. We can't." Krulok's claws raked across the officer's face, drawing blood. "Excuses! I want solutions!" Later, alone in his quarters, Krulok's rage cooled into icy calculation. He keyed a secure channel to his most trusted agents. "Prepare Operation Sundered Trust. It's time we reminded the galaxy of humanity's true nature." Days later, a massive convoy of refugee ships limped through neutral space. Families from a dozen species huddled in cramped quarters, fleeing the expanding conflict. Without warning, energy beams lanced out from the darkness of space. Vessels exploded, their occupants screaming into the void. As swiftly as it began, the slaughter ended. Across every communication channel, evidence of human involvement in the massacre spread like wildfire. Doctored sensor readings, falsified communiques, and staged eyewitness accounts painted a damning picture. On Earth, Campbell stared in disbelief at the reports flooding his office. "This is madness," he muttered. "We'd never—" His comm unit chirped. A grim-faced aide appeared on screen. "Sir, the Calaxians have formally declared war on the United Earth Alliance. Their sensor platforms are already online, feeding targeting data to Alliance fleets." Campbell's blood ran cold. The Calaxians' involvement changed everything. Human ships, once nimble and unpredictable, now found themselves hounded at every turn. It seemed the Calaxians could track their movements before the crews even plotted their courses. In a hidden resistance base on Voxar Prime, Ektor paced nervously. He'd called in every favor, pulled every string to arrange this meeting. The door slid open, revealing a slender Voxari female. "Zara," Ektor said, embracing his old friend. "Thank you for coming." The scientist's eyes were haunted, her movements tense. "I told you, Ektor, I'm done with war. The things I saw during the liberation—" Ektor took her hands in his. "I know, but the galaxy needs you. Your cloaking research could turn the tide." Zara pulled away, shaking her head. "More death, more destruction? There has to be another way." "There isn't," Ektor said softly. "Not anymore. The Alliance grows stronger every day. If we don't act now, billions will suffer under their rule." Zara closed her eyes, conflict etched across her features. Finally, she spoke. "I'll need a lab and a team." Ektor nodded, relief flooding through him. "You'll have whatever you need." Weeks passed. Human fleets suffered crippling losses, hounded by Calaxian sensors. But in her lab, Zara worked tirelessly. When she emerged, exhausted but triumphant, the tide of war shifted once more. Human ships, cloaked by Zara's revolutionary technology, struck with impunity. Calaxian sensor platforms went dark, their operators baffled by the sudden silence. On the bridge of the Indefatigable, Campbell studied readouts of a heavily fortified Calaxian research facility. "This is it," he said to his assembled officers. "Their next-gen sensor array. We take it out, we might just win this war." Captain Marcus Hawkins stepped forward, persistence etched on his face. "I'll lead the strike team, sir." Campbell clasped the younger man's shoulder. "Godspeed, Marcus. Come back in one piece." The raid was chaos incarnate. Hawkins and his team fought their way through automated defenses and Calaxian security forces. They reached the heart of the facility, securing the prototype array. As they prepared to exfiltrate, a Calaxian heavy weapons team pinned them down. Hawkins saw the grenade arcing towards his squad. Without hesitation, he threw himself on top of it. The explosion rocked the corridor. When the smoke cleared, Hawkins lay broken and bleeding. He grabbed Campbell's sleeve as the Admiral knelt beside him. "The array," Hawkins gasped. "Get it back. Use it. But remember, why we fight. Freedom. For everyone. No matter who they are." Campbell felt the life fade from his friend's body. Grief threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed it aside. There would be time to mourn later. Aboard the Indefatigable, Campbell stared at the captured sensor array. Hawkins's final words echoed in his mind. A chime from his tactical officer broke his reverie. "Sir," the young lieutenant said, face pale, "we're detecting a massive Alliance fleet on approach to Earth. And there's more. Long-range scans show unusual energy signatures in the Cygnus Nebula. It could be a Calaxian black site." Campbell's mind raced. Earth lay vulnerable, but the nebula could hide a game-changing weapon. He had to choose, and choose quickly. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, rested on his next order. Campbell's teeth gritted as he processed the lieutenant's report. Earth or the nebula, billions of lives or a potential doomsday weapon. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made his choice. "Divert all available ships to the Cygnus Nebula," he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of his decision. "Commander Riggs, assemble a stealth team. You're going in." As the Indefatigable and her sister ships surged towards the nebula's swirling gases, Campbell opened a secure channel to Earth's Defense Command. "This is Admiral Campbell. Prepare for imminent invasion. I'm sorry, but you're on your own." The nebula's charged particles crackled against the fleet's shields as they approached the hidden Calaxian facility. Riggs and his team, clad in matte black stealth suits, boarded their infiltration craft. "Remember," Riggs said, his gaze sweeping over the determined faces before him, "we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every world these bastards would threaten." Among the squad, Lixia checked her weapon, her Voxari features set in stubborn persistence. Ektor had protested her involvement, but she'd insisted. "This is my fight too," she'd told him. The infiltration craft slipped through the facility's outer defenses, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Calaxian sensors. As they docked with an airlock, alarms blared throughout the station. "So much for the element of surprise," Riggs muttered, hefting his rifle. "Let's move." They fought their way through twisting corridors, Calaxian security forces falling before their coordinated assault. In the heart of the station, they found it, a massive warhead, pulsing with barely suppressed energy. "By the gods," Lixia whispered, her eyes wide. "It's beautiful and terrifying." Riggs snapped out of his momentary awe. "Johnson, upload the virus. Everyone else, defensive positions." As Johnson worked feverishly at a control panel, waves of Calaxian troops converged on their position. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, leaving scorch marks on walls and bodies alike. A stray shot caught Lixia in the shoulder, spinning her around. She stumbled, fell. Riggs dragged her to cover, his face grim as he saw the severity of her wound. "Stay with me, soldier," he growled, applying a pressure patch. Lixia's eyes fluttered. "Tell Ektor, I'm sorry, and that I love him." Before Riggs could respond, Johnson's triumphant shout cut through the chaos. "Virus uploaded! The weapon's offline!" Relief washed over Riggs, but it was short-lived. A Calaxian grenade arced through the air, landing at his feet. He had just enough time to shove Johnson clear before the world exploded in light and pain. Back on the Indefatigable, Campbell received the bittersweet news. The planet killer was neutralized, but at a terrible cost. He allowed himself a moment of grief for Riggs, Lixia, and the others, before snapping back to the reality of their situation. "All ships set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed. We've got a planet to save." The human fleet dropped out of warp to find Earth under siege. Alliance ships swarmed around the blue-green orb, their weapons carving fiery streaks across the planet's night side. "Status report!" Campbell barked. His tactical officer's face was grim. "Earth's defenses are collapsing, sir. The Alliance has broken through the orbital platforms. They're beginning planetary bombardment." Campbell opened his mouth to reply when a new voice cut across the comms. "This is Admiral Vreta of the Korthi Defense Force. We stand with our human allies. Death to the oppressors." A cheer went up on the Indefatigable's bridge as Korthi warships decloaked, their weapons already firing. The battle was joined in earnest, space itself seeming to warp and twist under the fury of the engagement. Amid the chaos, Campbell spotted Krulok's flagship, its massive hull filled with weapons. He opened a channel to all ships. This ends now. Concentrate fire on the Zaxian dreadnought. Human and Korthi vessels surged forward, their combined firepower hammering Krulok's shields. The Zaxian vessel's return fire was devastating, gutting 2 human cruisers in a single salvo. Alarms blared across the Indefatigable as a lucky shot from Krulok's ship breached their armor. "Hull breach on deck 7, an officer shouted, "sealing emergency bulkheads." Campbell gripped his command chair, watching as Krulok's ship began to list, trailing debris and atmosphere. Victory was within reach. And then... "Sir!" His sensor officer's voice was tinged with panic. "The Zaxian dreadnought, it's on a collision course with Earth." Campbell's blood ran cold as he realized Krulok's suicidal intent. There wasn't time to intercept, to stop the massive vessel from impacting the planet. Earth's doom seemed certain. A new voice crackled over the comms, tinged with static and purpose. "This is Commander Frank Riggs. I've got one last trick up my sleeve, Admiral." Campbell's eyes widened in disbelief as he saw Riggs's battered ship, somehow surviving the Calaxian base's destruction, streak towards Krulok's dreadnought. "Frank, no!" Campbell shouted, but it was too late. Riggs's ship slammed into the Zaxian vessel, knocking it off course in a spectacular collision. Both ships careened away from Earth, tumbling end over end until they slammed into the lunar surface in a massive explosion. For a moment, there was silence on the Indefatigable's bridge. Then cheers erupted as the Alliance fleet, demoralized by their leader's destruction, began to retreat. Campbell allowed himself a small smile, but it faded as he saw the devastation wrought on Earth's surface. Entire continents were scarred by orbital bombardment, and the moon's new crater was already causing havoc with the planet's tides. "Sir," his science officer said quietly, "preliminary scans indicate Earth may no longer be habitable." The weight of command settled heavily on Campbell's shoulders as he realized the terrible choice that lay before him. Humanity had won the battle, but at what cost? And what would they do now with their homeworld lost? Campbell's grip tightened on the armrests of his command chair as he processed the science officer's words. Earth uninhabitable. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the enormous sacrifice. "Signal all ships," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Set course for the Raldis Nebula outpost. Maximum speed." As the battered human fleet limped away from their ravaged homeworld, Campbell retreated to his quarters. He stared at the star chart, mind racing. They needed a new strategy, something bold enough to shatter what remained of the Alliance. A chime at his door broke his concentration. "Enter." Admiral Vreta of the Korthi stepped inside, her scaled skin shimmering in the low light. "We've arrived at the outpost, Campbell. The coalition forces await your orders." Campbell nodded, gesturing to the star chart. "It's time we took the fight to them, Vreta. Not just defense, not just survival. We end this once and for all." He outlined his plan, coordinated strikes across Alliance space, targeting their homeworlds and strongholds. Vreta's eyes widened as she grasped the audacity of it. "It's risky," she said, mandibles clicking in thought, "but it might just work." Within hours, strike teams assembled across the outpost. Ektor, the former Voxari slave, now stood tall as he addressed his strike force. "Today, we free our brothers and sisters from the last of the Krell slave masters," he said, his voice carrying across the hangar. Aboard the Korthi flagship, Admiral Vreta studied holographic projections of the Zaxian shipyards orbiting their homeworld. "We'll cripple their ability to wage war," she growled to her crew. "For Earth." Commander Jiang, a wiry human with cybernetic enhancements, briefed his infiltration team. "Our target is Calaxian sensor tech," he said, tapping a schematic. "We get in, we get out, and we turn their own eyes against them." On the aquatic world of Neptulon, Captain Talia Kresh surfaced from the murky depths, her rebreather hissing as she removed it. She signaled to the gathered Neptulon rebels, their amphibious forms blending with the swampy terrain. "The Alliance Command Center is 2 clicks north," she whispered. "Remember, our primary target is the Adramari General. We need that intel." Talia's team moved silently through the alien swamp, bypassing patrols with practiced ease. They reached the subsea facility, its domed structure barely visible beneath the waves. "Charges set," her demolitions expert reported. "On your mark, Captain." Talia nodded. "Blow it." The explosion rocked the seafloor. Alarms blared as Talia's squad stormed the facility, their adapted weapons cutting through surprised Adremery defenders. They fought their way to the command center, where a towering Adremery general barked orders to his troops. Talia's stun grenades sailed through the air, detonating in a flash of crackling energy. When the smoke cleared, the Adremery general lay unconscious at their feet. "Package secured," Talia reported over her comm, heading to extraction point. Back at the Raldus Nebula outpost, Campbell pored over the intelligence gleaned from the captured Adremery. His eyes widened as he decrypted the final transmission. "We've found him," he breathed. "Orcs Naz, the Alliance leader." Campbell's gaze swept over the assembled strike team. At their center stood Alara, a former Calaxian slave whose fierce eyes belied her small stature. "This is our chance," Campbell said, "to end this war once and for all. Alara, you'll lead the assault on Naz's fortress. Are you ready?" Alara's grip tightened on her pulse rifle. "I've been ready my whole life, Admiral." The strike team's stealth ship sliced through the void, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Alliance sensors. They touched down on a desolate moon, the looming fortress of Orcs Naz casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Alara led the charge, her team moving with practiced precision. They encountered heavy resistance. Elite guards armed with weaponry far beyond standard Alliance tech. But Alara had mastered humanity's most advanced combat systems, and she cut through their defenses like a plasma torch through hull plating. They fought their way deeper into the fortress, leaving a trail of disabled turrets and unconscious guards in their wake. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum. Alara breached the massive doors, coming face to face with Orcs Naz himself. The Alliance leader was a withered husk of a being, more machine than flesh. Crackling energy coursed through his cybernetic implants as he turned to face the intruders. "So," Naz's voice grated like rusted gears, "the humans send their lapdog to do their dirty work." Alara's eyes narrowed. "I fight for freedom, Naz, something you wouldn't understand." Naz's laughter was a harsh metallic sound. "Freedom? You naive child. Humans are conquerors, no better than those they claim to oppose. They'll subjugate this galaxy under the guise of their twisted morality." "You're wrong," Alara countered, her voice steady. "I've seen their compassion, their willingness to sacrifice for others. They fight for equality, for the right of all beings to choose their own path." As Alara spoke, she noticed movement in her peripheral vision. Some of Naz's own guards were lowering their weapons, uncertainty plain on their faces. Naz's cybernetic eyes flared with rage. "Traitors! You dare question me?" The sanctum shook as explosions rocked the fortress. Campbell's flagship had breached the outer defenses. Naz's withered hands slammed down on a control panel. "If I can't have this galaxy," he snarled, "no one will." Warning klaxons blared throughout the fortress. Naz had triggered the self-destruct sequence. Alara's team fought to disable the demolition charges as Naz retreated deeper into the sanctum. The Alliance leader's fingers danced across an ancient console, activating a weapon of unimaginable power. "Behold," Naz cackled, "the legacy of the old ones. With this I will render entire star systems uninhabitable." A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Not today, you won't." Ektor stood in the doorway, his Voxari features set in fierce dedication. He charged Naz, tackling the cyborg leader to the ground. They grappled, Naz's augmented strength nearly overwhelming Ektor. Alara saw her opening. She dashed to the weapon's controls, her fingers flying as she input the override codes they'd extracted from the Adremery general. "It's done," she shouted. "Weapon neutralized!" Ektor pinned Naz to the ground, his blade at the tyrant's throat. But he didn't strike. "No," Ektor said, his voice calm. "We're better than that." Alara knelt beside the defeated Alliance leader. "It's over, Naz, but it doesn't have to end in more bloodshed. Help us stop this war. Show your people there's another way." Naz's cybernetic eyes flickered, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, with trembling hands, he tapped out a code on his wrist computer. "It is done," Naz said, his voice barely a whisper. "The self-destruct has been aborted. My fleet stands down." As news of Naz's capture spread, the remaining Alliance commanders began to surrender. The human-led coalition had won, but the real work was just beginning. Aboard the Indefatigable, Campbell prepared to address the former Alliance worlds. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders as he considered his next words. The future of countless civilizations hung in the balance, and he knew that what he said next would shape the course of galactic history for generations to come. Campbell took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the assembled dignitaries on the Indefatigable's bridge. The view screen flickered to life, broadcasting his image to countless worlds across former Alliance space. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Today marks the end of an era of oppression and the dawn of a new age of freedom." As Campbell's address continued, Commander Neil Bauer led a contingent of ground troops through the cavernous halls of a Zaxian slave processing center. The stench of fear and despair permeated the air, making Bauer's stomach churn. "Alpha Team, secure the eastern wing," he ordered, his voice low. "Beta Team, with me. We're heading for the main holding area." The troops moved with practiced efficiency, disabling security systems and subduing the few guards who offered resistance. As they reached the central chamber, Bauer's breath caught in his throat. Rows upon rows of containment pods lined the walls, each housing a captive alien. Some were curled up in fetal positions, while others pressed against the transparent barriers, eyes wide with a mix of hope and terror. "Get these pods open now," Bauer barked, his fingers already working to release the nearest captive. As the pods hissed open, a cacophony of sounds filled the air, gasps, sobs, and cries of relief in 100 alien languages. A small avian creature stumbled from its pod, its wings atrophied from disuse. Bauer caught it gently, helping it stand. "You're free now," he said softly. "We're here to help." In orbit around Zaxar, Admiral Vreda's eyes gleamed with fierce satisfaction as she surveyed the planet below. The Korthi fleet hung in low orbit, weapons primed. "Target the labor camps," she commanded, her voice carrying across the bridge. "Precision strikes only. We're here to break chains, not spirits." The sky above Zaxar lit up as orbital strikes rained down, systematically obliterating guard towers, security fences, and weapons depots. On the planet's surface, millions of slaves watched in awe as their prisons crumbled around them. As the dust settled, Korthi dropships descended, disgorging waves of ground forces and medical personnel. Vreda herself beamed down to oversee the operation, her scaled form towering over the liberated slaves. "Your tormentors are defeated," she announced, her translator conveying her words in multiple languages. "You are free to choose your own path from this day forward." In the Mirac system, Ektor stood at the head of a Voxari assault force, the imposing silhouette of the Black Citadel looming before them. The fortress prison's obsidian walls seemed to absorb light, a fitting symbol of the darkness within. "Remember," Ektor called out to his troops, "many of our brothers and sisters are still captive inside. We fight not just for vengeance, but for their freedom." The battle was fierce and bloody. Krell defenders fought with the desperation of those who knew defeat meant the end of their way of life. But the Voxari pressed on, their righteous fury fueled by memories of generations of suffering. Ektor led the charge into the Citadel's inner sanctum, his plasma blade cutting through the last line of Krell resistance. As the final slave master fell, a cheer went up from the Voxari warriors. The Black Citadel had fallen. Deep within the bowels of the prison, Ektor found the mining tunnels where countless slaves had toiled and died. The survivors emerged from the darkness, blinking in disbelief at their liberators. One emaciated Voxari stumbled forward, his eyes locking with Ektor's. Is it truly over?" he rasped. Ektor clasped the survivor's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, brother. The long night has ended. We are free." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as the chains of oppression were shattered. On Calaxia, Alara stood before a cheering crowd, her small form belying the strength of her conviction. For too long, our people have known nothing but servitude, she declared, her voice carrying across the assembled masses. Today, we begin the work of building a society where all are equal, where no being need fear enslavement. As Alara spoke, human advisors and peacekeepers moved through the crowd, distributing food, medical supplies, and information on the new interim government. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in living memory, hope bloomed on Calaxia. On Dremnik, the final stronghold of Alliance resistance crumbled under the assault of human marines. General Regas, once a feared Adramari commander, now stood in shackles before Admiral Campbell. "You cannot possibly believe this foolish crusade will succeed," Regas spat, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "The galaxy needs order, structure." "What the galaxy needs," Campbell interrupted, his voice firm, "is freedom, the right of every sentient being to chart their own course." As Regas was led away to begin his sentence, Campbell turned his attention to the massive task of reconstruction. Across liberated space, shattered worlds cried out for aid and guidance. He activated his comm, connecting to the Indefatigable's science bay. "Zara, I need you to assemble a team. Our work is far from finished." Zara's holographic form shimmered into view, her eyes alight with purpose. "I'm already on it, Admiral. We're pooling resources from a dozen worlds, focusing on sustainable redevelopment." Campbell nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The path ahead was dawning, but as he looked out at the stars, he felt a surge of grit. The age of chains was over. Now it was time to forge a future. The age of chains had ended, but the work of rebuilding had only just begun. Admiral Campbell stood on the bridge of the Indefatigable, surveying holographic displays of dozens of worlds in various states of recovery. "Status report, Zara," he said, his voice weary but determined. The AI's avatar materialized beside him. "Humanitarian efforts are underway on all major populated worlds, Admiral. We've established temporary housing for 72% of displaced individuals, and medical aid is reaching even the most remote areas." Campbell nodded, his eyes fixed on the rotating projection of Calaxia. "And what of governance?" "Alara has made remarkable progress," Zara replied. "The planet's first democratic elections are scheduled for next month. She's implemented a comprehensive education program to ensure all citizens understand their rights and responsibilities." On the surface of Calaxia, Alara moved through a bustling marketplace. Once empty stalls now overflowed with goods from a dozen worlds. She paused to help an elderly Calaxian woman select ripe fruit from an Adramari vendor. "You see," Alara said, her voice gentle, "we can build something beautiful together." The woman's eyes, once dulled by years of oppression, sparkled with newfound hope. "I never thought I'd live to see such a day," she whispered. Across the galaxy, on the scorched plains of Zaxar, Admiral Vreta oversaw the construction of massive terraforming engines. Human and Korthi engineers worked side by side, their technologies meshing in ways neither species had imagined possible. "Remarkable," Vreta murmured, her scaled hand resting on a thrumming power conduit. "With these advancements, we could restore habitability to a dozen worlds within a generation." Commander Zhang approached, datapad in hand. "Admiral Vreta, the first graduates of our Joint Science Academy are ready for assignment. Where should we deploy them?" Vreta's eyes narrowed in thought. "Send teams to Neptulon and Dremnik. Those worlds suffered the worst ecological damage under Alliance rule." On a low-gravity moon orbiting a gas giant, Ektor led a team of Gormani colonists. The former slaves, their bodies adapted for grueling labor in harsh conditions, now applied their strength to shaping a new world. "Channel the lava flow here," Ektor instructed, gesturing to a holographic map. "We'll use it to power the atmospheric processors." A Gormani foreman, his rocky hide glistening with exertion, nodded in understanding. "It will be done, Liberator Ektor. We thank you for giving us purpose again." Ektor clasped the Gormani's shoulder. "This is your world to shape now. Make it a home worthy of your people's strength." In a stark white room deep within a rehabilitation center, Dr. Janis Tullen sat across from General Regas. The Adramari's mandibles clicked in agitation. "You cannot seriously expect me to embrace your so-called values," Regas hissed. The strong have always ruled the weak. It is the natural order. Tolan leaned forward, his Voxari features impassive. And yet, here you sit, General, defeated by those you once deemed weak. Perhaps it's time to reconsider what true strength means. Aboard the Indefatigable, alarms blared. Campbell rushed to the command center, where a holo display showed chaos unfolding above Neptulon. "Report!" he barked. "Adramari extremists have seized control of the orbital shipyards," an officer replied. "They're threatening to bombard the planet unless we reinstate their authority." Campbell's lips pursed. "No negotiations. Prepare our assault teams. We'll take back those yards by force if necessary." As the crisis unfolded, Zara appeared beside the Admiral, her expression grave. "Admiral, I have concerning data to report. Our surveys indicate widespread resource depletion and ecosystem collapse across multiple worlds. The damage from centuries of unchecked exploitation may be irreversible without immediate action." Campbell's eyes narrowed. "Understood. Once we've dealt with this immediate threat, convene a Grand Council. We need all species working together if we're to secure a sustainable future." The Admiral turned his gaze to the stars beyond the view screen. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but as he watched ships from a dozen alien races converging to face the Neptulon crisis together, he felt a spark of hope. The age of chains had ended. Now the real work of forging a united galaxy could begin. Now the real work of forging a united galaxy could commence. Years passed, and the fruits of their labor began to blossom. Admiral Campbell stood on the observation deck of the newly christened Interstellar Confederacy headquarters, watching as representatives from 100 worlds filed into the Grand Assembly Hall. Chancellor Zara's holographic form materialized beside him. "The first session of the Confederate Council is about to begin, Admiral. Your presence is requested." Campbell nodded, straightening his uniform. "A day I never thought I'd see," he murmured. Inside the chamber, the cacophony of alien languages mingled as delegates took their seats. At the center podium, Zara's avatar expanded to its full size, commanding instant silence. "Representatives of the Confederacy," she began, her voice resonating through the hall, "today we take our first steps towards a truly united galaxy." As Zara outlined the principles of the new government, Campbell's gaze swept the room. He noted Alara, now ambassador for Calaxia, deep in conversation with a Korthi diplomat. Nearby, a human colonist shared a datapad with a Voxari, their heads bent together in quiet collaboration. The path to this moment had not been easy. On Korthi Prime, Admiral Vreda's voice boomed across a battlefield littered with the remnants of elite house forces. "Brothers and sisters," she called out to her victorious troops, "the old guard has fallen. Now we must build a Korthi society worthy of our place in the Confederacy." Cheers erupted from the assembled forces. A sound echoed across dozens of worlds as former slave species embraced their newfound freedoms. Yet not all transitions were smooth. On a bustling street corner on New Terra, General Regas hunched his shoulders as he hurried past a group of human colonists. Their whispers followed him. "Slaver, butcher, how dare he walk free?" Regas quickened his pace, mandibles clicking in agitation. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Dr. Tolan. "Ah, General," Tolan said, his Voxari features impassive. "Just the being I wanted to see. Walk with me." As they strolled, Tolan spoke of the challenges facing integrated societies, of the need for understanding on all sides. Regas listened, his initial reluctance slowly giving way to curiosity. Their conversation was cut short by the wail of alarms. Emergency broadcasts flashed across public screens. Alert. Calaxian extremists have seized control of Outpost Gamma. Human colonists held hostage. Confederacy forces en route. In the war room of the Indefatigable, Admiral Campbell surveyed tactical displays as reports flooded in. "Status on the strike team?" "Alara's leading the assault personally, sir," an aide reported. "They've breached the outer defenses." Campbell nodded grimly. "Let's hope this doesn't undo years of progress." On the fringes of settled space, the Gormani moon colonies thrived. Ektor stood atop a terraforming spire, watching as lava flows were expertly channeled to power atmospheric processors. A human scientist approached, her eyes wide with wonder. "Incredible," she breathed. "The way your people have adapted this harsh environment." Ektor smiled, a gesture he'd learned from his human allies. "We shape the world, and in turn, it shapes us. Perhaps that is the key to our shared future." As if in answer to his words, alarms blared across the colony. Emergency channels crackled to life. "Warning! Unknown biological agent detected on multiple worlds. Rapid ecosystem degradation reported. All stations on high alert." Ektor's eyes narrowed as he processed the implications. The withering had begun. The emergency broadcast crackled with urgency as Ektor's eyes widened in alarm. He turned to the human scientist, his voice grave. "We need to act fast. Gather your team and meet me in the command center." As they raced through the corridors of the Gormani colony, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire ecosystems were collapsing at an unprecedented rate, leaving devastation in their wake. In the Indefatigables' war room, Admiral Campbell's face was etched with concern as he addressed the assembled leaders via hologram. "The situation is critical. We're dealing with an unknown biological agent capable of stripping worlds of life in a matter of days. We need solutions, and we need them now." Zara's avatar flickered to life, her expression determined. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the data. There's something unique about the Gormani moon colonies. They seem resistant to the withering's effects." Ektor, joining the call from his command center, nodded in agreement. "Our atmospheric processors generate a specific type of radiation. It's possible this is shielding us from the pathogen." "Then that's our starting point," Campbell declared. "Zara, work with the Gormani scientists to recreate these conditions. We need to establish safe zones for evacuation immediately." As the call ended, Campbell turned to his officers. "Prepare for mass evacuations. We'll use every ship at our disposal." Across affected worlds, panic spread as quickly as the withering itself. On Neptulon, once lush forests withered and crumbled to dust in a matter of hours. In orbit, Confederacy ships materialized from seemingly empty space, Zara's cloaking technology allowing them to bypass the spreading contamination. As refugees poured into the hastily constructed nullification zones, Admiral Vreda oversaw the distribution of supplies and medical care. "We must maintain order," she barked to her officers. "These people have lost everything. We cannot fail them now." In a secure facility on Nutera, Dr. Tolan stood before a hulking figure restrained behind an energy barrier. Krulok, the fallen tyrant, watched impassively as holographic displays showed the mass exodus from dying worlds. "Do you see now?" Tolan asked, his voice heavy with sorrow. "This is the legacy of your regime." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Krulok's face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he murmured. "The withering, it was meant to be a deterrent, not unleashed." Tolan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Tell me everything." As Krulok revealed the terrible truth behind the withering's origins, Zara's team worked tirelessly to decode its genetic structure. In a makeshift lab aboard the Indefatigable, human and alien scientists hunched over complex holographic models. "We've isolated the key proteins," a Korthi researcher announced, her mandibles clicking with excitement. "If we can design a retrovirus to target these specific sequences, it could halt the spread," Zara finished, her avatar nodding in approval. "But we'll need to act fast. The pathogen is mutating at an alarming rate." Over the next weeks, as the withering continued its relentless advance, the Confederacy threw everything it had into the fight. Gormani radiation technology was rapidly adapted to create mobile shielding units. Korthi engineers worked alongside human specialists to modify orbital platforms for precise bombardment of infected areas. In a tense briefing room, Admiral Campbell addressed the assembled leaders of the Confederacy. "We have one chance to get this right. The retrovirus is ready, but its effectiveness will diminish rapidly once released. We need to hit every affected world simultaneously." Alara, her face drawn with exhaustion, nodded grimly. "The Calaxian fleet stands ready, Admiral. We will do whatever it takes to atone for our part in this catastrophe. As the countdown to deployment began, Campbell stood on the bridge of the Indefatigable, watching the synchronized fleets move into position. All ships, prepare to fire on my mark. The moment stretched, pregnant with the fate of countless worlds. Then, with a single command, beams of focused energy lanced from the assembled ships, carrying the retrovirus to the surfaces below. For agonizing hours, there was no news. Then, slowly, reports began to trickle in. On world after world, the advance of the withering slowed, then stopped entirely. In the nullification zones, refugees wept with joy as they received word that the immediate danger had passed, but the celebrations were tempered by the knowledge of all that had been lost. As the crisis abated, the true work of rebuilding began. The Confederacy faced the monumental task of restoring devastated ecosystems and repatriating displaced populations. On Calaxia, tensions reached a boiling point as the full extent of their government's involvement in the Withering's creation came to light. Alara stood before a raucous crowd, her voice amplified to cut through the din. "We cannot hide from the truth," she declared. "Our past leaders committed unspeakable crimes, but we have a chance now to forge a new path, one of transparency, accountability, and redemption." As Alara spoke, General Regas moved through the crowd, engaging with former slaves and sharing his own journey of transformation. The path ahead would not be easy, but the seeds of change had been planted. Aboard the Indefatigable, Admiral Campbell reviewed plans for the Ark ship program. Holograms displayed the sleek vessels that would carry the building blocks of life to ravaged worlds. "It's a new beginning," he mused, studying the schematics. Zara's avatar appeared beside him, her expression thoughtful. "Indeed, Admiral, and perhaps in restoring these worlds, we can forge an even stronger bond between our peoples." As the first Ark ships prepared for launch, Hector stood before a gathering of volunteers. His eyes shone with purpose as he addressed the diverse crew. "We carry with us the hopes of countless species," he said, his voice filled with quiet purpose. "Together, we will breathe life back into the stars." Barren worlds. His gaze swept over the assembled team, humans, Korthi, Calaxians, and more, united in purpose. Let us write a new chapter for our galaxy. As the Ark ships soared into the unknown, carrying hope and new life, the interstellar confederacy flourished. Decades passed, and Chancellor Zara's vision of a truly integrated galactic society began to take shape. On New Calaxia, gleaming spires rose from the ashes of the old regime. Alara, now a respected ambassador, stood before a crowd of thousands in the capital's Grand Plaza. Former slaves and house members alike listened as she outlined plans for further reforms. "Our world has come so far," she began, her voice carrying across the assembled throng, "but we must remain vigilant against—" A blinding flash erupted from the sky. The crowd scattered as debris rained down. Alara crumpled to the ground, her body broken by the orbital strike. Chaos engulfed the plaza. Security forces swarmed the area as medical teams rushed to Alara's side. Her life signs flickered, dangerously weak. News of the attack spread like wildfire across the Confederacy. On a dozen worlds, protests erupted. Some demanded justice, others called for vengeance. In the Indefatigable's war room, Admiral Campbell faced a sea of grim faces. "We can't let this spiral out of control," he warned. "If we overreact, we risk undoing everything we've fought for." "With all due respect, Admiral," a young captain interjected, "maybe it's time for a firmer hand. The liberation has gone too far. We need order." Before Campbell could respond, the room erupted into heated debate. As voices rose, General Regas stepped forward, his mandibles clicking softly. "We must not abandon our principles," he urged. "Due process, accountability, these are the foundation of our new society." A hush fell over the room as Zara's hologram materialized. Her expression was grave. "We have a more immediate crisis," she announced. "Admiral Vreta's Korthi faction, they never fully disarmed." Campbell's blood ran cold. "What are you saying, Chancellor?" "They've been stockpiling weapons," Zara continued, "including mutagenic agents, like the Withering. The silence that followed was deafening. Campbell's mind raced, processing the implications. Everything they'd built, the trust they'd forged, suddenly on the brink of collapse. "We must act," he declared, his voice tight with impossibly strong emotion. "Prepare a strike team. We'll take Vreda into custody and—" Alarms blared, cutting him off. Reports flooded in, Korthi warships opening fire on Confederacy vessels. Colonies under siege. The galaxy plunged into chaos once more. On the bridge of his flagship, Vreda watched the unfolding carnage with steely perseverance. "We do what must be done," he muttered, "to preserve the liberation, at any cost." As the first salvos of a new war erupted across the stars, Campbell clenched his fists. The dream of a united galaxy crumbled before his eyes, and the long night of conflict loomed once more.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.